Excuse me, sweetheart. Can I borrow you and your beautiful face just for a second?
9.
9?
9.
Hey, baby, as far as I'm concerned, you're a 10 and a half.
Welcome to Into the Vault, the movie review series where I dive into the good, the bad, and the bizarre corners of the Disney film empire, one randomly chosen title at a time. And this time, the randomizer pulled out something you probably didn't even know Disney made. A comedic crime caper set in Malta mixing mystery, espionage, and romance with, let's just say, varying results. Trenchcoat, a 1983 release from Disney, came out during the studio's awkward experimental years when they were trying to shed their family-only reputation. You can see the attempt here: guns, smugglers, international intrigue, and a reluctant amateur caught in the middle of it all. Interestingly, Trenchcoat, along with Never Cry Wolf and an international distribution of Dragon Slayer, is widely regarded as one of the films that paved the way for the launch of Touchstone Pictures on February 15, 1984. Touchstone was created as a separate Disney label so the company could release more mature, adult-oriented films without clashing with the family-friendly Disney brand. The movie came at a crucial time. Disney's animation division was struggling in the early 80s, and the studio knew it needed new ways to compete in Hollywood. Touchstone allowed them to dip into genres like romantic comedies, thrillers, and adult dramas, territory that would have looked completely out of place with the Disney Castle logo in front of it. The gamble paid off quickly. Touchstone's first release, Splash, in 1984, became a surprise box office hit and proved that the strategy worked. From there, the label would go on to produce and distribute films like Down and Out in Beverly Hills, Pretty Woman, and Good Morning Vietnam, giving Disney a steady foothold in more mature markets throughout the 80s and 90s. So, in that sense, Trenchcoat is part of Disney history. It may not have been a critical or commercial success, but it was one of the stepping stones that convinced the studio to finally take the plunge into creating Touchstone Pictures. Disney clearly wanted something that could capture some of the adventurous spirit of Indiana Jones or the slick style of James Bond flick. But what we got is, well, let's just say uneven. So the big question, is Trenchcoat an overlooked gem or was it buried for a reason? Let's open the case file and see if Trenchcoat deserves to stay closed. We open with our lead, a court stenographer named Mickey, tapping away on her typewriter as she sets up her grand adventure. She explains she spent 2 weeks in Malta to write this book, and we cut between her narration and shots of her plane trip there. On the flight, she notices a guy trying and failing to charm a flight attendant. His line of choice, telling her she must get lower back pain in her job. Smooth move, guy. When she asks if he's a doctor, he insists she just call him Terry. He claims he doesn't like special treatment, yet somehow manages to convince her to let him check her back. Cue Mickey's inner monologue describing his long fingers like probing rods. Terry delivers a completely made-up diagnosis and invites her to stop by his room later for some exercises. Already, the tone is set for the kind of questionable rom-com hijinks we're about to sit through. After Terry somehow manages to charm the flight attendant, he sidles up next to Mickey from earlier. He asks if she's headed to Malta, to which she deadpans, "No, I'm going to the bathroom." He then probes if she's traveling for work, but she brushes him off, explaining she doesn't like the attention her job brings. Before she can finish, he rudely interrupts, ironically enough, to dart into the bathroom himself. He's smooth 1 second, oblivious the next, and even insists he was there first before barging past her. The plane lands and Terry is still busy hitting on the flight attendant, but she quickly shuts him down, explaining she's based in Rome and won't be seeing him again. Meanwhile, Mickey sets her bags down to grab something from her purse, only for a man to snatch them and take off running. She gives chase, and in a twist that only makes sense in an 80s movie, the thief suddenly claims he's the best taxi driver in Malta. Rather than scream for help, Mickey just hops right into the cab. Questionable choice, but sure, different times. He peels away at reckless speed, boasting about knowing a cheap place for her to stay. When he smugly asks if she's glad, she flatly says no, earning nothing more than a sour stink eye in return. They finally arrive at the hotel, and the driver says he'll be back that afternoon to show Mickey around the island. She flatly declines, and he storms off in a huff. At the front desk, she learns there are no rooms available until she explains she has a reservation under Mickey. The clerk, expecting a man, raises an eyebrow, and Mickey wryly responds, "Everyone does." It's another small moment that highlights how often this movie treats women as if they don't belong, and really underscores the casual misogyny threaded throughout the film. The clerk then warns her the hotel may not be right for her. When she finally reaches her room, the clerk stiffly refuses her attempt at a tip. Mickey is then walking through a museum when we cut to a shady-looking man peering around the corner. He doesn't look friendly in the slightest. In the bathroom, he wipes a razor clean, and as he exits, we glimpse what looks like a dead hand hanging from one of the stalls. That's creepy. He then casually slips a postcard into a display rack Mickey happens to be browsing. Security guards stop him over a littering violation, which feels oddly low stakes considering he was just polishing off a razor. When he goes back, he notices the postcard he planted is gone. Was he really expecting to just sit there and no one to end up buying it? Either way, he quickly realizes Mickey must have picked it up. He starts to tell her and she is completely unaware. While she's walking around, she bumps into Terry again, this time trying to swindle a jewelry stall. Then, in a moment that really shows how tone deaf the film can be, he approaches a random woman and asks if he can use her for a bit. She responds in Russian with a firm 9, meaning no. His reply, saying she is not a 9, but a 10.5, and instructing her to act like she likes the vendor and smile. This is just another example of the film's lazy, misogynistic humor that ages about as well as sour milk. Mickey is now talking to the police about a supposed pickpocket. She explains how it supposedly works, even adding that in Hong Kong, thieves will shoot you up with Novocaine before robbing you, a detail that feels oddly specific and out of place. The police dismiss her concerns, telling her just to go back to her hotel and they'll contact her if something turns up. Understandably frustrated, she insists everything she had was in that bag. She asks to look at mugshots to try and identify the thief, but the police mockingly point out how is she supposed to recognize someone she never even saw. It's a moment that highlights not just Mickey's desperation, but also how unhelpful and dismissive the authorities are throughout the film. Mickey goes back to her hotel room to start writing her novel titled Malta Wants Me Dead, clearly pulling straight from her recent experiences. As she gets ready for bed, the creepy guy from earlier sneaks into her room. She spots him in the mirror and he tells her not to scream before calling her by name. With the same razor pressed to her neck, he leers that she looks much prettier than her passport photo, a line that feels both sleazy and threatening. It turns out he's the one who stole her belongings. Mickey manages to fight back, spraying him in the face with hairspray and kicking him out the window. She goes to scream, but no sound comes out. She runs down to the dining room of the hotel in just her towel, finally lets out a scream, and then promptly faints. The police arrive, but instead of helping, the hotel clerks suggest they should arrest her. Mickey pleads for their assistance, but the police officer just parrots her story back to her and points out the one glaring problem. The body is missing. The chief then smugly mentions he's been reading her book, and when Mickey clarifies that it's fiction, he dismisses her again. He's more annoyed by how she portrayed him in her writing than by the possibility of a violent crime. Mickey demands her book back, insisting her account is true, but the chief condescendingly tells her it was all in her mind, implying she might need to be examined if she keeps pressing. It's another scene that just shows how little respect the film gives Mickey, doubling down on its pattern of dismissing women as hysterical or unreliable. The next morning, Mickey is having breakfast when an older couple, Lizzie and Sean, strike up a conversation. They ask if she's having a nice holiday, and Mickey bluntly admits she can't wait to go home. They cheerfully suggest she give Malta more of a chance and then get out to explore, which only highlights how everyone around her keeps minimizing her very real distress. Mickey heads to the beach, where a man named Nino immediately starts hitting on her, comparing her beauty to the sea. He follows it up by commenting on her body, prompting Mickey to tug at her stomach in a self-conscious disagreement, because of course the film just had to shoehorn in a cheap fat joke, despite the fact that Mickey is clearly not fat. Then Nino takes it even further, bluntly telling her to sleep with him. She rejects him, but he keeps pursuing, boasting about his own physique and asking if she's ever seen such a body. Exhausted by his relentless advances, Mickey heads into the ocean to swim some laps, finally leaving Nino behind. It's yet another example of the movie's tone-deaf, misogynistic streak. Later, Mickey is playing in the sand with some children when they stumble across a dead body, the very same man she kicked out of the hotel window earlier. She's brought in by the police, exasperately telling them, "I told you I killed someone last night." But when they bring her to the coroner, the body isn't who she thought it was. The chief smugly reveals the real man she killed, who himself had murdered the other victim now in the morgue. Instead of a sympathy, the chief presses her for a connection, and when Mickey, overwhelmed by the morgue, says she feels like throwing up, he jumps to accusing her of hiding drugs and demands to know where they are. Mickey promptly faints. Someone needs to get this girl some smelling salts. Mickey wakes up in a jail cell, disoriented and confused. The chief arrives with Terry in tow, who suddenly claims to be her lawyer. How he managed to track her down is anyone's guess, but here he is, ready with another tall tale. The chief grudgingly releases her since he isn't ready to press formal charges yet. He smugly adds that he found her passport and checks tossed in the garbage bin, but insists on keeping the passport because there are still potential charges hanging over her head. Mickey and Terry head out to the station, and Mickey demands to know what he's even doing there. Terry claims he knows she was in a jam and whips out a newspaper with her face plastered on the front page under the headline, American Held in Drug-Related Murders. Seeing that, he decided she needs his help. Mickey, exhausted and overwhelmed, declares she just wants to go back to the hotel, lock the door, crawl into bed, and stay there. Terry, ever oblivious, undercuts the seriousness by asking if she wants company for dinner. That night at dinner, Mickey and Terry share a conversation. Terry launches into one of his wild tales about his supposed adventures in Malaysia, though who knows if a word of it is true. Mickey actually cross-references the details and catches that two of his stories overlap in impossible ways. Busted! Terry quickly changes the subject back to her when she presses him about why he makes up so many stories. He admits you don't exactly impress a girl by confessing you dropped out of college, drove a cab, and sold jewelry for your uncle. He then asks what she does, and she tells him she's a writer. On the walk back to her hotel, Terry smirks and asks if he's going to make it into her book. We jump to a casino where Terry is playing roulette. Nino shows up and, without consent, forces a kiss on Mickey. Another gross display that the film plays off far too casually. He then tells her what numbers to bet on, and while Terry stews with jealousy, Mickey improbably wins off Nino's picks. As if the awkward tension weren't enough, a woman named Ava strolls up to Terry and flirts, saying he looks like a guy who's about to get lucky. Mickey wins again, Terry introduces her to Ava, and the whole dynamic is dripping with weird jealousy vibes. Sensing the strangeness, Mickey decides she's had enough and says she wants to go home. Mickey and Terry are driving back when they notice a car tailing them. Trying to brush it off, she tells him good night, but he suggests she couldn't spend the night alone if she really thinks she's in danger. When Mickey gets back in the hotel, she has to knock since it's past curfew. As she goes inside, the suspicious car pulls up again, only to speed away once she is safely through the door. Mickey calls the U.S. Embassy, desperate to get out of Malta, but without her passport, there's little they can do. They put her on hold, and of course, the hold music is blaring patriotic American tunes, because subtlety doesn't exist in this movie. Leaving her hotel, she runs into the taxi driver from earlier and asks him to take her straight to the embassy. But when they arrive, that suspicious car from before suddenly crashes into the taxi, and the men inside, depicted as broad offensive Arab stereotypes, snatch Mickey, dragging her into their vehicle. The men who kidnapped her demand to know what she told the police and where she supposedly hid 10 kilograms of drugs. They also mention an auction, which leaves her completely confused. During this exchange, the taxi driver is trailing them, trying to intervene. He attempts to ram their car off the road, but ends up crashing his own taxi, hood flying off. Yet he still keeps up the chase. The kidnappers inject Mickey with a supposed truth serum, a not so subtle callback to the earlier Hong Kong Novocaine line, after which she immediately blurts out that she's a court stenographer and, oh yeah, that they have terrible breath. They take that as proof the serum is working. The taxi driver rams them again, giving Mickey a chance to stumble away, moving like a dazed zombie under the drug's effects. We then see Mickey wandering down a road on her drugged, truth-telling haze when a car suddenly turns around, and of course, Terry just happens to be inside. Still out of it, she rambles honestly as he whisks her off for an impromptu picnic. There, Terry gives her a necklace that literally says trouble, which feels a little too on the nose. Mickey admits she really likes him, surprising even herself. She confesses that when they first met, she thought he was obnoxious and probably insecure about being such a big failure. After this oddly tender exchange, she lies down and drifts off to sleep. Back at the hotel, the clerk is talking to Ava when Terry and Mickey walk in. Terry is practically carrying Mickey, who's still woozy from the drugs. Mickey points out that Ava is the same woman Terry tried to flirt with in the marketplace, which immediately makes things awkward. Sean and Lizzie, the old couple from earlier, reappear and casually bring up the kidnapping like it's small talk over tea. Terry gets Mickey into bed, and in her hazy state, she asks if he's taking advantage of her and suggests he should at least try kissing her first. The scene plays uncomfortably, a mix of supposed comedy and very questionable consent. Terry closes the curtains while Mickey impatiently tells him he's taken too long. When he presses her for a full story, she explains what she knows about the auction and how everyone seems to think she has something connected to it before finally passing out. We then see a scene with Mickey's kidnappers plotting their next move, talking about how they need to find the drugs. In a display of cartoonish carelessness, they light a candle and the entire building explodes, taking them with it. The next morning, Mickey walks through the dining room and runs into Sean and Lizzie again. They tell her that the nice young man asked them to keep an eye on her, gushing that Terry is a real catch and that she ought to marry him. This is one of those moments where the film really pushes the idea that Terry is charming, but honestly, he's been a little more than a walking red flag up to this point. Mickey clearly isn't buying it either. She spots a newspaper announcing that the men who kidnapped her are now dead, which should be a relief, but instead just raises more questions. And right on cue, Terry shows up again and Mickey insists he needs to take her straight to the police. Terry warns that if she brings her to the police, she'll be arrested, and Mickey admits he's probably right. She'd make the perfect fall guy in this ridiculous plot. They argue, and Mickey finally decides she's done being passive and vows to figure everything out herself because she's tired of playing the victim. It's one of the rare moments where the film lets her show a little agency, even if the script immediately undercuts it. Ava conveniently shows up right then, showing Mickey a necklace that Terry had made for her and insisting that the women need to stick together. It's a strange detail that feels more manipulative than empowering, but Mickey goes along. Terry, of course, can't help himself and tails them in hot pursuit. Mickey says she needs information fast and heads into a local bar to dig something up. She barely gets a word out to the bartender before the usual crowd of men start hitting on her. Because of course they do. This movie can't resist. She offers $5 to anyone who knows Harry Benjamin, the second dead guy from the morgue scene. One man ups the price to 10 and leads her back to his ship to search the bunk. They find nothing at first until Mickey looks up and discovers a note, a picture of Princess Aida, a singer in a divey bar on the wrong side of town. As Mickey makes her way there, she notices she's being tailed. Panicked, she bolts, only to discover it's Nino following her, who claims that he's the one being followed. Mickey also notices that Nino is wearing one of Terry's necklaces, which makes everything feel even more suspicious. Nino and Mickey trade information about what they've pieced together so far. Nino drops the big revelation that the 10 kilos everyone is chasing isn't drugs at all, it's plutonium. Really? The film casually tossing nuclear material into the plot feels like it's trying to up the stakes without actually earning it. Nino then flips through some photos showing Mickey a picture of Ava, claiming she was the one who blew up the Arabs and that Terry was her accomplice. Mickey shows him the photograph of Princess Aida, who Nino suggests they go find her. He excuses himself to the bathroom, but when she doesn't return, Mickey goes looking and finds him dead in the alley with a knife in his chest. She runs off in panic, searching for Nino's killer before reaching a payphone and calling the U.S. Embassy. She frantically reports that there are terrorists in Malta, only to be put on hold once again with the blaring patriotic music. The film seems to think that this is a running gag, but at this point it's more frustrating than funny. Mickey arrives at the bar where Princess Aida performs, and while she's sneaking inside, a man with a gun creeps up behind her. He demands to know what she wants, and Mickey explains she needs to speak with Princess Aida about Harry Benjamin. He tells her to sit down before dramatically revealing that he is the princess. It's a twist that actually feels surprisingly progressive for 1983, presenting Aida's reveal with a matter-of-factness that stands out in a film otherwise bogged down with stereotypes. Mickey asks about the plutonium, and Aida insists she wants nothing to do with it. She explains that Harry had promised to take her to the south of France. Though he was illiterate, he taught himself to write her address and would send postcards from wherever his Navy assignments took him. That's when it dawns on Mickey that the mysterious map is actually hidden within one of the postcards she left back at the hotel. Suddenly, gunfire erupts and Mickey scrambles through the bar, running on stage before leaping into the crowd and bolting out the front door. Outside, she runs straight into Ava, who is waiting with a gun. Ava demands Mickey's postcard and casually reveals she was the one who killed Nino. Then a gunshot rings out, Ava collapses, and of course the shooter is Terry, swooping in once again to save the day. Sean and Lizzie are out for a walk when they spot Mickey hiding behind a wall. They tell her that Terry has been waiting all night for her. Mickey asks them to sneak into her hotel room and grab her notebook and postcards, warning them not to breathe a word to Terry. When Lizzie walks by him, he immediately notices how nervous she looks. She manages to get the notebook, but when she returns, Terry spots it in her hand and calls her out, demanding to know where Mickey is. Lizzie reluctantly leads him to her, and Mickey greets him at gunpoint. Terry says he was worried about her, but Mickey fires back that what he's really worried about is getting to the plutonium first. Sean and Lizzie hand over the postcards, and Mickey gives Sean the gun, telling him to shoot Terry if he makes a move. Then comes the big twist. The kindly old couple burst out laughing, admitting how much time they wasted tearing apart her hotel room and still came up empty. Suddenly, they turn the tables, tying up both Mickey and Terry and setting a very stereotypical looking bomb. Wires, ticking timer, the whole cliche. Terry blurts out that he's actually an agent, but Mickey scoffs why she believes anything he says at this point. Meanwhile, Sean and Lizzie hold the hotel clerk at gunpoint, carting him around as part of their getaway. Back with Mickey and Terry, they manage to knock some garden shears off a shelf, cut through the ropes, and hurl the bomb just in time before it explodes. Here's where the film reveals a big twist. All those necklaces Terry has been handing out are actually wire transmitters he used to track everyone. He explains he tagged everyone who came into contact with Mickey after her face ended up in the newspaper. They spot Lizzie and Sean giving chase until Lizzie suddenly opens fire. She manages to wound Terry, forcing them to switch seats so Mickey can drive, though she quickly reminds him she doesn't even know how to drive a stick shift. They end up crashing their car and forcing Sean and Lizzie's vehicle into the water, where the police promptly show up to arrest them. It's a rushed climax that feels more like the film just wanted to wrap things up than deliver any real payoff. The movie then wraps up with Mickey narrating while writing her book, explaining how Sean and Lizzie were sent to jail and that she never saw Terry again. But of course, in the ultimate cliche, the narration cuts to reality, revealing that Mickey and Terry are now together. He pops his head in to ask her to come to bed because he can't sleep with all of the clacking of her typewriter. A supposedly romantic ending that feels more forced than earned. Now let's talk about what I actually thought of Trenchcoat as a whole. Starting with Mickey, she's a character who deserved better than the script gave her. There are moments where she shows strength, quick thinking, and determination, but the movie constantly undermines her by surrounding her with men who either dismiss, harass, or outright endanger her. Watching her faint repeatedly or be treated as a hysterical gets old fast, and it makes it harder to root for her despite Margot Kidder giving it her all. Harry, on the other hand, is a walking contradiction. The film clearly wants us to see him as charming, roguish, and ultimately heroic, but most of the time he comes off as insufferable. Between his constant lying, his tendency to swoop in at convenient moments, and the way the story bends over backwards to pair him romantically with Mickey, the so-called romance feels unearned. By the end, when the movie insists they're a couple, it feels more forced than natural. As for the side characters, Ava is a little more than a plot device, shifting from background flirtation to gun-toting villain without much in between. Nino is written like a cartoonish sleaze, his entire character arc being one long harassment bit that overstays its welcome. Sean and Lizzie are perhaps the most interesting of the bunch, since their kindly old couple facade turned into full-blown villainy is at least a twist. But even that ends up played in the most over-the-top way possible. The plot itself is all over the place, bouncing from murder mystery to spy thriller to slapstick comedy without ever truly excelling at any of them. The addition of plutonium feels like a desperate attempt to raise the stakes, and the countless coincidences that bring Terry into every scene makes the story feel contrived. The romance between Mickey and Terry is the final nail in the coffin, as the film tries to sell it as a grand conclusion when it barely even functions as a subplot. Overall, Trenchcoat is fascinating more for what it represents in Disney's history than for what's on screen. It's a messy, uneven attempt at branching out into adult-oriented storytelling, and while there are occasional glimmers of intrigue, most of the time it stumbles under its own weight. And that's it for this Maltese misadventure. So, what did the random picker land on next? Well, here's the thing. The original flashy randomizer site I was using is actually down now, so I had to settle for a less stylish replacement. But the results still stand out. Out of over 1,000 Disney-owned titles, it gave me Deceit from 1991. The Touchstone thriller stars Goldie Hawn in a much darker role than most people associate her with, trading broad comedy for psychological suspense. It promises to be another sharp tonal shift, from messy slapstick mystery to a more serious early 90s thriller. I'm curious to see if Deceived is a forgotten gem or just another product of Disney's experimental phase. Let's open the vault.